Today we're reading 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 11 to 21. Now, where I want to start today is actually from yesterday a little bit. Paul is continuing to talk to the Corinthians, trying to convince them to listen to him and not listen to the other false teachers that are present in Corinth. Paul says in yesterday's reading, he says, I'm not going to boast about myself. I'm not going to boast about the areas that I am strong in. I will only boast in my weaknesses. Yes, Paul says, I will only boast in my weaknesses because he references something that Jesus says. He says, God's power is made perfect in my weaknesses. God's power is made perfect in my weakness. We can do nothing without God. And when we realize this, that is when God's power is made perfect. Now, can't you feel the passion and the conviction behind what Paul is saying? And Paul's passion and conviction continues into today's reading. He is doing all and saying all that he can in order to convince the Corinthians to turn from their ways and believe in the message that he is proclaiming. Let's start right at the beginning in today's reading, starting at verse 11. You have made me act like a fool. You ought to be writing commendations for me, for I am not at all inferior to these super apostles, even though I am nothing at all. When I was with you, I certainly gave you proof that I am an apostle, for I patiently did many signs and wonders and miracles among you. The only thing I failed to do, which I do in the other churches, was to become a financial burden to you. Please forgive me for this wrong. Now I am coming to you for the third time, and I will not be a burden to you. I don't want what you have. I want you. After all, children don't provide for their parents. Rather, parents provide for their children. I will gladly spend myself and all I have for you, even though it seems that the more I love you, the less you love me. Wow. These are the words that jumped out at me as I read through today's reading. The Corinthians are hitting a sensitive spot for Paul. As you'll remember from the previous readings, one of the reasons why, one of the things that hurt Paul's credibility among the Corinthians was his refusal to ask for their financial support. In these verses we just read, I can just imagine Paul thinking and saying, how could the fact that I am not asking you for money hurt my standings with you? He says, I didn't want to be a burden to you. He says, I don't want anything from you. I don't want your possessions. But what he says is, I just want you. Goodness, I hear the compassion in his voice. He's gotten to the end of his rope, said all that he can say, and it comes down to, Corinthians, I just want you. Paul so desires for the Corinthians to know the reason for the hope that he has. He wants Christ to become real to them and for transformation to come to their lives. He says, I will gladly spend myself and all I have for you. In another translation, it reads, I will most gladly spend and be spent for your souls. Just for the hope that they will come to know Jesus. He says, I will gladly spend and be spent for your souls. Today, where I want to leave us is just to think about the extent to which Paul went in order to preach the gospel, to make the name of Christ known. He, along with others, truly sacrificed everything and expended energy, time, resources, emotional capacity in order that others might come to know Jesus. Where would we be today if it weren't for those early followers of Jesus who put everything on the line to spread the gospel? We have the opportunity to go all out with just as much passion and conviction as Paul towards the specific calling that God has placed on each of our lives. The need is just as great as during the time of Paul, and there is growing urgency because every day we get closer to the day when Jesus will come back again. So let's live on mission with passion and conviction along the calling that God has placed on our lives. It's specific and intentional. God has a calling for your life that only you can fulfill. So let's live it with passion and conviction.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.